Mike. Chat. Pink Moscato. Chat. So today, what is this? 20 anti-capitalists versus 1 capitalist Patrick. See, I'm familiar with Patrick Bet-David. Pink Moscato, chat. I don't like him. I think he's a sellout to his people. And he's a scammer. On top of that, he runs a very biased right-wing news outlet on social media, Valuetainment. And the people he has on are just morally questionable at best. But let's evaluate him critically. All right, let's not go off of my biases or preconceived notions.
This is the United States of America.
Would you take money from a capitalist to help you go see specialists? Things of defaming. Be very careful defaming when you don't know the fact. I'm Patrick Bet-David. I'm an entrepreneur and founder of PBD Podcast. Today, I'm surrounded by 20 anti-capitalists.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't even think his name is actually Patrick Bet-David. I'm not sure. I don't want to defame him. But one thing I noticed that he actually is not a good he's not good at debating. He provides very weak arguments.
My first claim is incentive is the engine of capitalism. Remove it and the system fails.
Meet you, Patrick.
Before the person goes, I want to say this. If you have to, any system that is run off of a monetary incentive, where the options are do the deed, right? Do the job or starve. That means that you're basically relying on like coercion essentially to run your economy. And that's not healthy in any sense, spiritually, physically, whatever, however you want to deconstruct it. Because people shouldn't have to be essentially forced into being cogs in the machine in order to get the bare minimum of basic needs. So this is one of the things where people say, especially people who are pro-capitalist, are like, if there wasn't any motivation, if there wasn't any incentive, everything would fall apart, right? If people didn't have, if people need to be in a state of scarcity in order to motivate them to work. And that's just not true. Human civilization prior to capitalism was literally people building and forming communities, not because of profit, but because they needed to survive and because they wanted to do it. They wanted community because we're communal creatures. They wanted to establish agriculture and farmland and stuff like that so that way they can eat, right? You didn't need a profit incentive at all.
What's your name?
My name's Mason.
Mason, good to meet you.
Yeah. I'm Valuetained. I'm a big fan of the channel.
Are you really?
Yeah, I do watch it quite regularly.
Very cool.
I do not agree with your claim. I don't think that incentives are only born out of capitalism.
Okay.
Most capitalist defenders say that incentive is because of scarcity, and people's ability to get what is necessary pushes them to work harder. I disagree with that. I'd say that some of our hardest workers are single moms working 3 to 4 jobs, and the resources that they're able to acquire compared to those that utilize their workers in order to build profit for their own companies is not equivocal.
So how would you do it? How would you change it?
Yeah, so I think that humans inherently want to be meaningful. They want to contribute to their communities. They want to contribute to society. When you look at depression rates, oftentimes it's people who aren't able to do anything besides laying in their bed and basically barely taking care of themselves. So I think that it's just a human intrinsic value to want to bring value to their community or grander society.
Okay,
so I don't.
And that's true. And that's one of the fallacies of capitalism, of the capitalist narrative. It's like when it's not rooted in any sort of psychology at all. It's just a narrative that people need, like a profit incentive to get up out of bed in the morning. Like the guy said, as a communal species, we naturally have this desire to want to integrate or to want to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. And so when the thing that we want to integrate with is something that we deem to be toxic or counterintuitive, or overall just a drain on our lives, naturally you're going to see people counter that. You're going to see countercultures evolve. You're going to see an increase in deviant, or what some people would call maladaptive or antisocial behavior, in the sense that people are going to disassociate from the system because they don't see how it benefits them or the greater good in any regard. And so, and many times people who are pro-capitalist will allow this narrative to reinforce their point of view because then they're like, well, see, they're not really doing anything. And it's like, well, they're not doing anything, not because they don't want to, but because you have people, like he said, working 3 jobs, barely able to make ends meet. where's the the motivation goes out the window in situations like that. I don't think people need motivation as much as they need drive and purpose. And you get that drive and purpose by being in alignment with yourself and your community, which you know is reciprocal, but not from a system that only siphons your labor and your time while giving you pennies. Because they treat a salary. The capitalists, they advertise a salary as though it's liberation, and really it's just shackles. It's the only thing that keeps you ensnared because it's the one thing that you need. Otherwise, you literally die.
I think that it has to be through scarcity alone that scares people into working, if that makes sense.
I worked for scarcity. I think there's levels to it. You have the survival folks who work for survival to pay their bills. Some work for status, some work for freedom, and some work for legacy. The folks that work 3 or 5 jobs, to pay their bills and do what they're doing, if the incentive wasn't there, they wouldn't work 3 to 5 jobs. Some of the guys that build a bigger business that solve a lot of problems.
The incentive there is either I die or I work. That's not really a system that rewards merit. That's a system that pushes people into insecure positions.
Not necessarily. In many cases, we put ourselves in situations as well. But when we're talking incentive...
Are you saying that it's an individual failure for these single mothers that are working 3 to 4 jobs?
For some of them, it is.
Interesting.
For some of them, it is.
I'm glad you bite that bullet.
I came from the single mother system. My mother was a single mother. We had, my parents got a divorce twice. They married each other. They divorced. They remarried each other, divorced again.
I'm going to stop him right
I
there.
came up...
That whole, people put themselves... And I had this debate with someone yesterday about this. People, if you're born into poverty, you're more than likely going to die in poverty. If you're born into wealth, you're more than likely going to die in wealth. If you're born into the middle class, you're more than likely going to die in the middle class. These are just facts, right? So upward mobility has become increasingly harder since, for the last 50, 60 years, right? And part of that is because they saw that black people were starting to not get it together, but black people were starting to climb the ladder. And so they had to put things in check to prevent that from happening. Part of the reason why college isn't free. Reagan. Too many black people going to college. Part of the reason why we don't have free healthcare. They don't want black folks to have healthcare, right? And I talked about this in my last video. The way the system works isn't to necessarily to benefit white people as much as it is to harm black people. And so white people will feel the ramifications of that because the system isn't rooted in uplifting white people. It's rooted in the suppression of black people and non-white people, but primarily black people. And so when people say stuff like, people made their decisions, that's a personal failure. There's a threshold for when something becomes an individual failure and then a social issue. So if you have a country of 330 million people, you have 1,000 people that are homeless. That's an individual failing. When you have unemployment rates climbing, inflation increasing, the housing market going to shit, you have 1/4 of recent college grads, or even I think it's more than that, can't find employment at all. I think it's more like 30%. With AI predicted to take over half of all entry-level jobs in the next 5 years. Unemployment rate is going to skyrocket. People are going to be impoverished. And then on top of that, you have things like student loans, right? So you tell people to go to college, you need to go to college to get this job. But to go to college, you have to go into mountains of debt that you don't have because you started college at 17, 18 years old with no money because you're a fucking teenager. And then you graduate 5, sometimes even 6 figures in debt to get a job that's not there. So you either can't get a job or the job is extremely low paying and you can't pay it back. On top of that, you have interest rates on the debt. And so the debt just keeps on skyrocketing and compounding. And there's no legislative checks on things like predatory lending, on how much private equity can buy up housing. Because why the fuck does private equity need housing? Things like that. And so when you see these trends and how that factors into homelessness and poverty, that's not a matter of individual failing. When you see single mothers trying to make ends meet, that's not, especially when people complain about the birth rates being low, but then you don't want to support single mothers. That's not an individual failing. That's a societal failing. Because why is it that a single mother cannot afford what she needs from one job? Why does she need to work multiple jobs to get basic needs for her and her kid? People are doing their best and the system does not give a shit about them.
We didn't have a lot of choices. I joined the Army. I got at that system. Kind of wanted to see what I was going to do for myself. Do I stay in the Army? Do I get out of the Army? I started working in sales. And then the incentive of working harder, eventually I built a good life for myself.
Again, you're totally dismissing the hard work that a lot of these people are putting into for just basic survival. I'd say that mechanics and plumbers and most people work in blue.
And then on top of that, people like that, they use their personal experiences to sort of invalidate a broader sociological issue. Just because you were able to do it by maybe hard work or scamming, which this guy is, that doesn't mean that everybody can do the exact same thing, because there are a number of factors and confounding variables that go into personal success that they are either ignorant to or they do not talk about because it ruins their narrative. And I've used this example before. Me personally, I have been very blessed in my life, and I have been able to achieve a lot of things academically, financially, etc. And I would not have been able to do any of that were it not for my environment, despite the hardships I went through. I'm not saying I had a cakewalk, but I'm also not saying that I grew up in how to get out the mud. But there are so many things that go into that, and I can't attribute my, say, intelligence just to me having a strong work ethic, because I have a shitty work ethic. I can't attribute my accomplishments just to that, just to me being smart, for instance, when I had good professors, good teachers, good mentors growing up, and parental and parents.
Collar jobs that are probably watching this video are working tirelessly day after day. And I'm glad that you're an outlier that's been able to build a lot of success for yourself. I know that you're a multimillionaire. That's fantastic that you have those resources.
When you explain
but the thing is that
let me
cannot
ask you this
happen
question,
for everybody in society. It's possible for each individual to do it, but not everybody can be a millionaire. That's guaranteed.
I don't think not everybody can be a billionaire or a millionaire, but I do think people can find ways to use their time to effectively increase their market value. And I don't think many people do that. When I talk to people and they tell me, I've watched this show, I've watched every one of these shows, I've watched every one of these Netflix shows, you can use that time to increase your market value instead of kind of, focus on what's going on with the stories and shows that are out there.
Let's move away.
See, the boomer talking points again. Oh, you're watching Netflix. That's why you're poor. The 30 minutes that you spent watching Netflix is the reason why you have no upward mobility. Meanwhile, it costs $700,000 to buy a regular 3-story house in rural America. You feel me? They lean on their personal experience to scaffold their entire worldview, and that's because they're tainted and controlled by ego. So they don't see beyond their lived experiences, and this is a testament to a lack of empathy. And this is why you see this mentality, especially on the right, because they don't see beyond themselves. They only see what they can do. And what they can do is supreme. What they can do is law. And what they can't do, what they can't comprehend, they dismiss and just say that doesn't matter. Just say, oh, well, that's them. Without looking at the fact that whatever aptitude you may have is just you. But you can't hold everyone to that same standard. A prime example, and I was talking about this yesterday, is like LeBron. LeBron was able to literally go from nothing at the age of being broke and poor to being a billionaire, right? Having a beautiful family and everything like that. But LeBron had a lot of things that went into that. It wasn't just his talent, although he is very talented, of course, arguably the greatest of all time. He had scouts, he had coaches, he had a lot of people that helped him. But on top of that, he's also just a genetic freak. And so, and I mean that not in a derogatory way. And so because of that, he 6'9", 250, whatever, is an outlier among outliers. So if you held every NBA player to that same standard, we would not have a league. And so that's how it is when people like this say, hey, I became a millionaire, or I leveraged my time and my market value. Human lives are not predicated by the market. Your value as a person is not predicated by what you can produce for the market. It's not predicated by your productivity on the job. Your value as a human being extends beyond that. And so what these capitalists like to do is they like to confine essentially what is the infinite potential of human beings to what you can sell. And that's not who you are, because not everyone wants to do that. This is one of the reasons why the arts and humanities are suffering in our society, not because we don't have people who are well versed in them, but because we have a society that doesn't value it because you can't sell it. You can't sell talking points. Like, I mean, you can actually, apparently you can, but you can't sell, you know, knowledge in the same way you can sell a product, because it's intangible. It's not valued because it teaches you to question the system and question your worldview rather than just adhering to it and trying to fit in.
Minimum wage jobs to provide for 3 or 4 kids. How would you say that that's a meritocratic society?
Those are two different things.
They are two different things. Very unequal.
He's either Patrick Bet-David is either a pathological liar and he doesn't believe what he's saying, or he's psychotic and he's so disconnected from reality that he does believe what he's saying. I can't tell you which one is worse. A lot of people are like this. And the reason why I say that is because anyone who looks at the modern state of America and believes that it's still that it was never a meritocracy because it was built off slave labor. How do you have a meritocracy and you need slaves to build your society? That literally contradicts a meritocracy because you're forcing people into labor while you sit at home and do nothing. You sip tea on the porch and whip people and beat them while they produce all the capital for you. That's not meritocratic in any sense of the word. And so the foundation of the country isn't meritocratic. And it's continued with evolved systems of slavery via mass incarceration, war on drugs, redlining, things like that, right? Not redlining as well, convict leasing, things like that, right? We can acknowledge that there's an underlying system of slavery that still scaffolds a society, and that intrinsically contradicts the idea of a meritocracy. When you have mass economic inequality and the wealth gap continues to grow, and I think it grew like twice as much during COVID than it did during the 2008 economic recession. If wealth was a product of merit, or success, or economic success was a product of merit, every single parent who works 2 or 3 jobs will be a billionaire. If the world, which is largely capitalist run right now, was rooted in merit, every single man, woman, and child in Africa would be a trillionaire.
Necessarily, the parents get credit for making responsible decisions so they can take care of their kids. The parents
so
get credit.
It's not a meritocracy, though. We're building dynasties of wealth.
I didn't come from dynasties of wealth.
I know,
came from
you're an outlier. I get that. I get that individual. But we're talking about systems. Capitalism is a system. It's not an individual
testimony. But it's a system that you get to use in your advantage. There's not an economical system that's produced better results than this based on the incentive.
History is a march of progress, right? So there are going to be advancements that we...
That's not true. And the reason why I say that is because this, right? Capitalism says, they'll say, and I think later on in this video, I saw this in the ad, that he's going to bring up the point of like, capitalism has lifted more people out of poverty than any other system. It's also put more people into poverty than any other system because it inherently relies on exploitation. It inherently relies on imperialism. There's no way capitalism, as it is right now, can survive without exploiting the global south. So not only is that meritocratic, it's also pure evil. It's exploitative. And on top of that, it creates the inequality that it purports to uplift. In the Amanda Seales video, she talked about this, and I commented on it as well. They were talking about the black community. Giving black people, the black community receiving billions or trillions of dollars in aid from the government, right? But at the same time, the government also puts forth endeavors like over-policing, mass incarceration, war on drugs to subvert those very same endeavors that they put into helping the community. So when you create the issue, you can't solve the problem because you're literally the reason why there's poverty or crime in the first place. And so it starts with the system creating the issues that it is purporting to solve. And people fall for this, and that's a damn shame.
Or there's going to be solutions that we make to previous ailments. I'm not saying that capitalism hasn't brought in better things than systems like feudalism or monarchy, but that does not mean that we're at the end of history. Do you think that capitalism is the final solution? And this is what we're going to last
I think capitalism is the best economical system because it gives an incentive for you to decide how big of a life you want to build. And the best way to judge it is in a very simple way. Take all the countries around the world. There's many different economical systems. What has the longest line of people wanting to get in there? It's America. Why is that? 15 million people came here illegally. Millions came here illegally just the last 4 years.
But a lot of that is because of economic scarcity in other countries.
Right, and that economic scarcity that is present in those other countries is usually because of exploitation from the U.S. and Europe and Australia, Canada, the West. You can even throw Japan in there, but not really. Not anymore. So it's like this, right? Imagine I rob you. I take all of your shit. I go erect a castle. And I have all your shit on display. You're poor as shit. And then I say, I throw a party and I open the doors. I say, hey, check out my new shit. If you want to come in here, come on in, right? I'll give you. You're going to be like, hey, you know, I'm poor. This guy right here who literally robbed me and took everything. They have everything. Well, I'm going to go there because it's either the woods or getting like a small room in the castle, right? And so it relies on feeding people pennies. And this is where it's rooted in scarcity. The entire economy is scarcity based. It's a debt based system at that. So it's already rooted in not having, which even if you get into the metaphysics of it, is maddening and purely psychotic, because how do you have a system predicated on not having instead of having? Now you have a system predicated on debt, or on the negative, or on a net negative than a net positive, with there being more debt in the world than there is actual money, which only proves that the economy is fake. Because who you pay that debt? Who are you paying that debt to? The bankers, right? But the bankers are continuous. They literally thrive off of debt. So they need the debt-based system to operate in order to keep up the illusion that money is real and that it has value. Going back to my previous point. I'm a Scott over here. Hold up. Yes. Y'all see little raspberries in that? Anyway, going back to my previous point. People say, we're like complaining about like the immigration issues, especially like with the U.S. it's like from Mexico and South and Central America, and then with Europe it's from Africa and the Arab nations. When you continuously steal from people and bomb the hell out of them, the people have to go somewhere. So they're going to go where there was prosperity, where there was wealth, and there was only prosperity and wealth because you stole it. So yes, people are going to go to the capitalist nations because you literally killed and destroyed everything else. The only way the system of capitalism, racism, white supremacy works is if you eradicate cultures and countries that were already doing well before you. So it's not meritocratic when it has to erase cultures that could potentially do better than it, or contradict it, or uproot it entirely just by organically existing. What's this? Yeah, she right.
How are you? What's your name?
Hi, I'm Alana. I think the issue is the framing of incentive here. Incentive doesn't disappear in a socialist or a communist society. It just changes and evolves. So we see in capitalism the incentive is obviously monetary gain, maybe even collecting capital itself through land ownership. In a communist or a socialist country, you would see incentive would just evolve into, I know it's a vague term, but the common good. You have an incentive to do your chores around your house because you don't want to live in a filthy house. Right.
There's a lot of redheads here. And not a lot, but I think there's only 2, but still, that's a lot. You know, how often do you see redheads?
Or you're saying that people should be excited to do their job, whether they're getting incentivized for it or not. That's what you're saying.
People will be incentivized to do.
Give me a case study. Give me a case study of that worked. Give me one case study.
We don't even need to look at case studies. We can just look at charity work.
Well, why don't we actually?
I find it interesting how he wants a case study for a contrarian point, but he won't provide a case study that proves his point. So he can't prove that capitalism is meritocratic and actually works based off of the incentives that he's talking about. He cannot prove that capitalism isn't rooted in people just not wanting to die rather than it is people wanting to make money.
North Korea, South Korea. One is communism and one is capitalism.
Yes.
North Korea's GDP last year was $23 billion.
Are we judging countries' values based off GDP and not what they value for
freedom of speech? You can't, like, if you lived in North Korea.
See, this is the thing, right? GDP literally doesn't mean shit, and the reason why I say this is because if you have a billion, like Elon Musk alone has more money than the GDP of most countries, of a lot of countries, right? It's not a metric for economic growth. It's not a metric for prosperity. Because if Elon Musk went to North Korea, suddenly the GDP goes up. by like 400 billion or some shit like that, right? And even still, South Korea right now is farthest from an ideal example. And I think he's relying on people's ignorance of that fact in these discussions. Because South Korea, like a year ago, almost fell into a dictatorship just like North Korea. Because the president at the time, or the prime minister, I can't remember, he essentially like locked out parliament and initiated martial law. They got in there like just in time and voted to overturn his ruling or something like that. So he was a dictator for like 11 minutes or some crazy shit like that, right? And nobody listened to him. On top of that, the place is like it's having a fertility crisis, a birth rate crisis. The economy is going to shit, you know. And I believe it's like quite the opposite, where like North Korea is actually experiencing more growth. I'm not saying they're doing better, but they're experiencing like more economic growth right now, or they're somewhere on par with like South Korea. So that's one thing. Another thing you have to look at is this, right? Because I think it was like up until like the 60s, North Korea was actually doing better than South Korea, even as a communist or socialist nation, even though they're not actually communist or socialist, but still. But like with North Korea, and this is where history is important, because I remember back in school, you know, when I was like in 5th, 6th grade, when we were learning about them, they never talked about how the U.S. bombed North Korea so bad and made much of the land unarable. That's the word, arable? So it couldn't be farmed. But on top of that, they killed 20% of the population. And yet still they're able to bounce back and become more prosperous than South Korea. And I'm not praising North Korea. I'm not praising the regime. I'm not praising their repressive tactics or anything like that. I'm just stating the facts. But they also neglect the fact that North Korea was sanctioned to death by capitalist countries. So again, capitalist countries like the United States in particular fail at their own agenda, at their own claims. And we know that it's just surface level bullshit, because if you look at the manifest function of the United States, it's not to have a meritocracy or democracy, because look at what it actually does. The U.S. funds 73% of the world's dictatorships and multiple terrorist organizations around the world, like ISIS, which is just a U.S. proxy. And they fund these false wars to create division and destabilize entire regions. But getting back to my point with North Korea, they can't do business with any other country because they've been sanctioned into oblivion. The fact that they even exist still today is a miracle. They're basically cut off from the rest of the world, aside from China, Russia, and Iran. He's Iranian. I'm going to get into how he's a traitor to his people later on. But considering all of that, you can't be like, look at how bad North Korea is doing, when you have stripped them and isolated them from their ability to interact with the rest of the globe.
Stats in South Korea, their GDP is $1.7 trillion.
South Korea is also owned by like 5 companies in total in the entire
70
country.
times better.
That's the thing. South Korea is like one of the biggest oligarchies on the planet. Like, it's literally owned by like Samsung.
Practically unemployed in these countries.
Do you like to be free?
I'm not going to be free in a country like South Korea where I'm only employed in 5 companies
to call
or no
somebody
job.
out like me? Do you like to be free where you can have a strong opinion? Do you like to be free to have your
I
dreams
like to be
as,
free, but that's why I'm anti-capitalist.
Well, maybe
This is why the Koreas are a bad example overall, because unlike the North, you have like 1984, and then in the South you have cyberpunk. But then they bring up these talking points, right? Do you want to be free? Do you want to have the freedom to question the government? It's not like you could do that here. He and I'm gonna pull up a clip later, but he's afraid to say anything against Israel. Israel isn't even a part of the United States. Now, we understand that they control the United States by proxy. They control both sides of the political aisle. They fund both sides through AIPAC and other lobbies, right? We understand that we're essentially occupied by them, politically speaking, and that they control a lot of the media. So he talks about freedom, yet he's afraid to speak out against Israel. One of the reasons why he won't have Nick Fuentes on his show.
if I have someone on that Israel is furious, like let's just say if I have Nick Fuentes on, you know what Israelis are going to say? So disappointed in you. You know, I can't believe you sold out. I can't believe you did this. They're going to say those types of things, okay? And maybe even try to actually get the interview to be flagged, okay? Like when we had Tommy Robinson on.
By his own admission. And I'm not a supporter of Nick Fuentes by any means. But a broken clock is right twice a day, even if it is still a racist piece of shit. Having said that, he won't have another person on his show because he's afraid of what, not public backlash, but what Israel, which by proxy is the owner of the U.S. government, would say. So he can't even question his bosses. Right? He can't even question the people that gives him the money. That's the thing about capitalism, is that it relies on abuse. There's a link between capitalism and abusive relationships, where when people are financially dependent upon an individual or a system, they can't question the system without severe repercussions. They can't question the individual without severe repercussions. So in a capitalist system, sure, you could say whatever bullshit you want about, hey, I hate this, I hate that, whatever, right? But if you question the people in charge, you question the power, you question the actual dynamics of the system, you get in trouble. You can question Democrat, Republican, question Israel, question the lobbies, question things like that. Now it's a problem. You start getting defunded. You start getting demonetized. You lose everything. I might even get flagged on this video. I don't know. I might even get the shit taken down. I don't know. Right? And so in an abusive relationship, it's the same thing. You can't you try to question your partner who you're financially dependent on, and they kick you out or they abuse you, and you can't leave, because if you do leave, you'll lose everything. You'll be on the streets, you'll be starving, you'll be homeless, you'll be poor. And so it's the same mental gymnastics where it relies on people to be in a state of not just scarcity, but in a state of dependence. And this is why Thomas and Carr rejected Western aid, and why they hated him for it, because he recognized that Western aid, Western wealth, any sort of money that they gave them. I said us. I'm sorry. I'm not from Burkina Faso, but that they gave them wasn't liberation. It was a leash, and they would be beholden to the West.
Country.
Would you give up your citizenship to go to that country? Whichever communist country you want to go to.
Yeah,
Cuba, we can give you Venezuela, we give you North Korea, any one of those you want to go to. Choose any one.
It's a weak argument to say that, because they also neglect the fact that every communist and socialist country was destabilized or destroyed by the CIA through coups and multiple, I don't want to say the word, but G-sides, ethnic cleansings of people in those countries. What was it? The Monroe Doctrine, which is that the U.S. basically has complete hegemony over over South America and the Western Hemisphere that Europe can't interfere with, right? And so even though Europe can't directly interfere with it, one, that doesn't mean that they don't get involved, but two, that doesn't mean that that South America and Central America are free from exploitation, because of the fact that, again, the U.S. has funded multiple coups in South America to overthrow socialist governments and communist governments, such as when they sanctioned the hell out of Cuba the same way they did North Korea, and Cuba is still under those sanctions. And I believe every time the UN votes to remove the sanctions, only two countries disagree. It's the U.S. and Israel. And so my thing is this, right? If communism and socialism are so bad, why do they have to actively work to destabilize them? Shouldn't they just organically fail? And that's not just with economic or political systems. That's with anything. Whenever someone criticizes you, right? Whenever someone criticizes a people or a system, if it's so bad, it should be able to fail on its own. You don't have to lie. You don't have to destabilize. You don't have to cheat. You don't have to kill. You can just let it fail. And so take this for instance, like African Americans, the black community. People say, okay, the black community's in shambles. Well, black people can't do shit, right? How many black communities did they burn to the ground? Lake Lanier, how many black communities did they flood? Central Park, how many black communities were destroyed? So black people are incapable of doing anything, yet they are always destroying our communities. They're always invading our countries. Think about it. If people are really insufficient and really can't survive or act autonomously or create prosperity for themselves, why do you have to constantly get involved? Why do white people, why does white America or white culture, Eurocentric cultures, European cultures, have to constantly destabilize nations and cultures that are doing well for themselves?
Hi. What's your name?
My name's Hunter. I'm going to be honest, I've never seen your videos before. Even though there is some real value to free enterprise, the profit motive often creates a perverse incentive and worse outcomes in certain situations. For example, healthcare. How much would you pay for a life-saving treatment for yourself or one of your family members?
How much would I pay for it?
Say you have cancer and you have an 80% survival rate with chemotherapy and less than a 10% without it. How much would you pay? Whatever it takes, right?
Sure.
That's a situation of inelastic demand, when the amount that you're willing to pay is not based on the value of the service, because your life does not have a finite value. In the US, 66.5% of all bankruptcies are because of medical debt. In most other developed nations, that number is way lower, if not zero. And at the same time, the US does not have one of the best healthcare systems in the world. We pay over $13,000 per capita. Meanwhile, Taiwan, which by most metrics has the best healthcare system and a national healthcare service, only pays about $2,500 per capita per year.
So what does that tell you?
That
tells
tells
you
us
that's wasted expenditure.
Yes, that.
Oh, he came with the facts.
Address the issue with incentive right now, with capitalism.
The reason why the medical debt is so high in that is because of the profit motive. If people will pay whatever it takes to not die, the profit motive in that case is perverse, because healthcare.
There shouldn't be a profit motive on healthcare because it's literally people's lives. It's the prospect of death. There shouldn't be an incentive where it's like you either pay 30K, 40 bands, or you die from things like childbirth. It costs like 40K to have a kid, you know? It costs $500 for an ambulance. Why does it cost money to get basic health care?
Shouldn't be a market in the same way that other things might be a market.
So you don't think the motive to have profit, to come out with a solution, is a good thing for the marketplace, specifically in healthcare?
No, it's not good for healthcare at all. I'm sorry. It's beneficial to healthcare or health insurance organizations, but for the concept or the idea of healthcare as a whole, there should be no profit incentive at all. There shouldn't be a profit incentive to save lives, to save the lives of mothers and children, to save the lives of people who are suffering from cancer, from diseases, from ailments that they can't control.
Source of Home Depot is Ken Langone. His father died at 62 years old. Ken Langone today is roughly 90 years old, give or take. When he died at 62 years old, he tells the story that if there was a simple thing as blood thinners, his father would have lived to be 90 years old just like he is today.
Yes, that makes sense.
Came because of innovation, which he's been on for many years. My dad's been on blood thinners.
Right now, not all innovation is the result of the market. Because
the idea that innovation is market driven, again, that crumbles if you just read or understand history. So one thing is like, in ancient Arab and African cultures, they were doing cataract surgery while Europe was essentially in squalor. There's no profit incentive there. It's literally just human ingenuity and innovation. It doesn't come from, hey, I got to make as much money. Like, money doesn't bring out the genius in people. It doesn't bring out authenticity. It doesn't bring out ingenuity. Money brings out a desire to survive, because it's either that or death. But the intrinsic things that people have within them, their intelligences and whatnot, are not brought out through profit. They're brought out through drive and through connection to your people or to your culture, to want to better it, not to profit and exploit off of it.
Many healthcare developments are created by research grants from healthcare funding, whether it's in the United States or in other countries. In most other first world countries, the result of medical research developments, which are massively outpacing that in the US now because of our inefficiency, because we have a market-based system for healthcare.
A very basic question for you.
Most of that is because of non-market-based systems.
Basic question for you. If that's the case, it keeps going back to the same thing. If it's better in other places than it is here, why are Americans and others not going there? Why are people coming here? It's very basic.
Because people can't afford to go there. Do you know how much it costs to go take a flight, go stay in another country, and then get a treatment? That's assuming that you even get the opportunity to do that in the first place. Because usually there will be like a wait list. And it's understandable, especially when you're understaffed. But where the US and other countries like Taiwan bifurcate is that Taiwan is a very small country with very limited resources. The US is a very big country with practically unlimited resources. So if you wanted to heal people, if you wanted to get people the treatment that they needed, literally overnight. You could do that for a lot of people, not everyone, of course. That would be a huge undertaking. But for a lot of people, you could. They just choose not to because it's a privatized system. But if you were to nationalize that, right, and you were to dedicate more doctors, or let's say something like this, you also take away the profit incentive of like universities and colleges, and you make college free again prior to how it was under Reagan. Let's say you make things like medical school free again. So you have people who have an aptitude for the medical field, for being doctors, right? Healers, essentially. They now go into the profession. They don't have to worry about paying back debt. And so they can focus more time not on worrying about whether or not they're going to pay back their student loans or they're going to eat tonight. And they focus more on their studies. Would that not breed more innovation? Would that not breed more prosperity in the field, in the studies, in the academia, than the current system that we have right now?
How much does a plane ticket cost?
No, they have the money to go to different places. They don't, because they know America's the greatest country in the world. They know it.
That's a weak argument. It's not that they I'm going to tell you right now. This is like this. He has like the same syllogism as like when people say, why do people still live in Gotham? Do you know how expensive it is to move out? Like Gotham City is a huge city. I know it's fiction, but it's a huge city, right? And the rent there is probably $12, so maybe it is okay to move out of Gotham. But that means you have to move to somewhere else where you first have to be able to establish a job, right? And then on top of that, you have to be able to move in. So you need to have like a means of moving. And if most people can't cover a $500 emergency fund, they can't move out and they're essentially stuck. And this is where I say the disconnection comes into play, because he doesn't relate to the average middle class or lower income experience, and he can't because he's not there. And this is a thing where like a lot of people forget where they come from once they achieve a degree of status and wealth. And they think, hey, if I could do it, so can you. Shut the fuck up.
Appreciate
Nice
you.
to meet you, by the way.
The guy is so nice. One thing that you'll notice, and like with more, I'm assuming that these people were like more left leaning, versus like with the Amanda Seals debate where they were conservatives, that these discussions are far more civil and respectful. Whereas with people on the right were openly just either lying, like they were openly just lying, right? Or there was malice. There were malicious undertones in how they conveyed their arguments, or how they approached Amanda Seals herself. And even their rhetoric itself was self-destructive to the black community, whereas here people are genuinely trying to benefit and find better systems than the current one that we have right now.
The incentives are what make it work, and I think that's the whole issue, is that the primary incentives are either greed, amass as much personal wealth as you possibly can.
You think that's the problem? It's greed?
Yeah, exactly. And
Because you're not greedy at all.
And like you said, survival.
Yeah.
Right? So the person, working 5 jobs, that they're doing that so they
Sure.
would.
And see, that statement right there, so you're not greedy at all. It's like they project. So just because you're greedy doesn't mean that other people are.
They wouldn't want to do that if they didn't need to survive. But that's such a horrible dystopian world to live in. If someone has to work 5 jobs just to survive.
How did they get there? How much of that is on their decision making? How much of that is on their doing? How much of that?
If you look at it statistically, very little. Very little of it is just people having poor financial decisions. And more so the fact that they're confined to a system where they have to work 5 jobs, or they have to go into massive amounts of debt to afford basic needs. You can do the arithmetic. You can do the arithmetic, and you can see for yourself.
Is on the market where they're not finding ways to improve themselves.
It doesn't matter how much onus is on the individual. We want to create a world.
Of course it is.
No. See, we want to create a world in which people don't have to earn their right to exist, to live.
We live in a country where majority of the world wants to come here. The most important city. You think that's just all it is? You think I came from a gang ridden in Iran? I lived there 11 years.
I think the majority of certainly coming from South America.
Most people come here because what you're doing to me, you're sitting across from me right now.
Right.
Millions of people are going to watch this. In America, you can call me out. You can say whatever you want.
Right.
Nothing's going to happen.
Right.
You're free and safe here,
sure.
right?
Freedom of speech is
You
nothing to do
can't
with
do that in
capitalism.
Iran. Of course it is. There's a lot of elements with America. You're talking incentive. The amount of benefits America offers.
there is an overlap between capitalism and democratic values, right? However, you can also look at the CCP China, right? And they have a hybrid system of capitalism and communism and socialism, right? And you can argue about whether or not they have free speech. Sure, you say fuck Xi Jinping, you're probably not going to see the light of day the next day. But in America, even if you have free speech, what does that mean? And I know people don't like him, and I've had my gripes with his positions. Andrew Tate mentioned this as well, right? And I'll probably put up the clip, but he mentioned this. In America, you have the freedom to do a lot of dumb shit. So you can say fuck George Bush, right? You can say fuck the world. You can change your gender. You can do stupid shit like that. Do you want to know how the banking system works and who runs it? You can't teach that. You can't learn that. Do you want to learn the actual history of this country? Nope, can't do that. Do you want to learn how a political system actually works? You want to know how debt and the monetary system works? You can't do that. So even if you can say dumb shit, that's not necessarily freedom. You know what I mean? It's just degeneracy unleashed. That's not the same thing as actually having the freedom to change the system that you're in. True freedom would mean that once something doesn't work, you have the agency, you have the ability, and you to alter it for the betterment of the people, for the society as a whole. But it's been co-opted to the point where you can't do that now. You do that now, you're anti-Semitic, or you're ostracized, or you get fired from your job. You're blackballed, blacklisted, right? So you can't actually question the things that matter. So who cares if you can say, I fucked a unicorn yesterday without getting arrested? Who gives a shit? What does that actually mean? Now, I'm not saying that you can necessarily do that in other countries, but what I'm saying is that you basically have the same system, but with more ways to neuter people. You have a dictatorship. You have a bicameral dictatorship, which is basically a one-party system at that point, in which you can't actually criticize or question the people who were in charge without being disappeared or losing everything.
Against other countries, but to say the individual that's working 3 to 5 jobs, if you do that for a season, if you do that for 2 years, if you do that for 5 years, fine. If you do that for 20, 30 years, you're doing something wrong.
But the point is, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? Those are the inalienable rights. We shouldn't have to earn those rights. We shouldn't have to earn the right to health care.
You do have to earn it.
Earn the right. No, because
actually,
we just want to live, exist. We can't work our blood, sweat, and tears just to survive. That's a horrible dystopian world that we live in right now.
Then what do you think we're here for? To just sit around and play video games?
What
do you think we're here for? To sit around and watch TV shows?
We're here.
This is the problem with the capitalist narrative. It acts like human beings are intrinsically lazy until there's a profit incentive that says, hey, get up off your ass and you get $100 to go mow my lawn. It ignores literally like 12,000 years of human context, of human history, in which the profit incentive wasn't there. It's a weak argument that only relies on low informational perspectives, and falls apart the minute you actually think critically or open a book. The minute you actually see past the United States. If you're pro-capitalist, your argument revolving around the efficacy of capitalism should not fall back on things like morality or politics. It should fall back on just the system itself. Does it actually work? Does it actually lift people out of poverty? Once you go to narratives and deflection and say, well, go look at these people, you've lost the plot right there. You've lost the argument. Look at you. What are you not doing? In order to address or assess it critically, we have to look at it not in a vacuum, but in a vacuum. We have to be able to say, okay, there are other systems and there are flaws in other systems, but that's not the point. We're talking about this one right here, right now. Stop deflecting to North Korea. See, notice how he didn't bring up China yet. Stop deflecting to the Soviet Union in the 1960s, which he didn't bring up, but I'm pretty sure he will. And focus on the unemployment and the poverty and the starving single mothers and single fathers and individuals trying to make ends meet in our current society right now. Focus on the people who are in Section 8. Focus on the homelessness problem in DC, in which the president's solution was to kick them the fuck out, rather than actually creating avenues for people to attain wealth in the first place. If it works so hard, if it works as good as they say it does, why do they have to constantly deflect? I can tell you right now, there are plenty of things in my life which I know work for me, or which I know are true that I know work, and that will work for other people. And I don't have to deflect and say, go look at what they're doing right there. I'll say, look at what's going on right here, and this is why you should do this. I don't have to disrespect other people, other cultures, other ideas. I can just prove the efficacy and the merit of what I'm doing.
Cat
We
videos. What do you think we're put here
we
to
are
do?
here to create a prosperous community, to lift
How do you
everyone
create a
up.
prosperous community? How do you create a prosperous community? Matter of fact, for you, how have you positively impacted a community?
I guess volunteering, food banks.
When they were building all these great civilizations across the world, do you think the Native Americans were concerned about getting a check? And some people would say, oh, Native America, that's before, and I want to bring this up. There were kingdoms, there were cultures, there were vast civilizations in the Americas prior to European or Columbian contact. Because there were Europeans here before Columbus, the Vikings and things like that. Probably even the Knights Templar, if you really look at it. If you're really into history like that. There was an emphasis on the communal good that the European cultures didn't have. So when the Europeans came here, it was all profit, it was private enterprise, it was me, how can I enrich myself? The Native American systems were more so community centered. How could we do what's best for other people? Now somebody's gonna be does that mean that they were all peaceful and kumbaya type of people? No, that doesn't mean that at all. But the general consensus and ethos of the civilizations and of the culture was one of community and the common good. One of us, the collective, and the unity with nature rather than the exploitation of it. And you can say, okay, well, not everybody was involved in the us idea, right? Because there were warring tribes and cultures, and 100% I won't disagree with that. But every culture has had conflict. Most of European history prior to 1948 was conflict. I mean, they're killing each other even while they're having colonies. Asia, East Asia, the Chinese, the Japanese, Koreans. I mean, they've been at each other's throats for how long? So there's always going to be that conflict. But the general ethos and the general disposition of the culture, of the society, of the people still remains steadfast. And it's not of exploitation, it's of common good. It's really Europe and European ideas that introduced that concept into the world.
I appreciate you for doing that. Have you created jobs for others?
Created jobs? No,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say
Why
so.
have you not?
I haven't had the ability to do so.
Do you think it's easy or do you think it's hard?
To create jobs is probably hard, yeah.
Okay, so the people that create jobs, you think they should have a little bit of incentive for having risked their life savings, spend time away their families to create jobs so somebody like you can work for that company?
Sure, but that
is
not,
the incentive.
And bravo for them, but that does not give them the right to pay themselves $2 million bonuses while their workers are scraping by at like $10 an hour.
You don't get to choose how much money I choose to make. That's not your business. That's my business. If you have 4 girlfriends and I have one.
What the Bro, if you talk about meritocracy and then you literally admit to exploiting your laborers, you lost the argument.
Is it my business to tell you can't have 4 girlfriends?
I think
if you play 7 hours of,
if I got 4 bitches, okay, that doesn't take away from everybody else who wants bitches. There are literally are there more women in the world than men? I don't know. Let's say it's even. Let's say it's split. 4 billion to 4 billion. Let's say I got 7 hoes. Okay, having a roster, for instance, doesn't last forever. In fact, you're lucky to get past 2 to 3 months. I'm speaking from experience. At my peak, I had like 10 hoes for like 6 months or 5 months or some shit like that. In like the middle of college or some shit, like sophomore year. But I didn't take away from other people having hoes. You know what I mean? On top of that, it's a personal decision of the hoes. If they want me, then they just fucking want. That's a bad example. Like, I've heard people try to present that argument like, hey, bro, if you have, like, this is just an asinine example. Because if the hoes want you, the hoes want you. That don't have nothing to do with other people. That's just a testament to who you are. You're not exploiting other people to get the baddies. You're not taking away from other people. The baddies are literally just going to you autonomously of their own volition. Nobody told them to. Nobody streamlined them to you. They want to do that.
What's your name?
Zena.
Zena.
I see Shawty on TikTok and IG. I will not lie. Never mind. I ain't gonna say what I wanted to say.
This claim about incentive is one that we see often promoted by capitalism enjoyers, right? Mm-hmm. And it's this idea that, profit incentives is the only thing that can make humans do things, get up out of bed every day, which has never been the case. Historically, it's not the case. Psychologically.
Historically, it's never been the case?
No.
What has been the case?
So we've seen...
What's been the incentive?
The incentive is intrinsic motivation.
Intrinsic motivation?
Of course. Have you ever heard of intrinsic motivation?
Of course I have. So you think people are going to go just do anything for no incentives?
Yes.
The incentive is
oh my fucking God. Bro, that's literally college. My motivation to go to college was not even to use my degree in a field of my choice. I genuinely just enjoyed college. I enjoyed learning. I enjoyed learning more about psychology. I enjoyed learning more about criminal justice and the law. I enjoyed learning more about the intersectionality of systems, of races, of things like that. I enjoyed what I was doing. And that's why I did my research projects. I didn't get paid to do my research projects. I didn't get paid to do my dissertations. I didn't get paid to go to grad school. I enjoyed what I was doing. I felt like what I was doing would contribute to the common good. I felt like the research that I did had merit. I felt like it had value. I felt like people could learn and grow and evolve from this. There's nothing in it that was profit driven from me. The only thing that I did that was profit driven was when I wrote essays for people, which is, I guess, is considered plagiarism or whatever, or academic dishonesty. Go ahead, sue me right now. Because I wanted to get a car. And I wanted to eat food. The cat food was disgusting sometimes. But them chicken tenders used to slap. And the pizza would be low-key good too. But my point is that the motivation to learn, to grow and evolve as an academic and a scholar isn't rooted in anything monetarily. And I used to talk to my professors about this. As researchers, you don't get a profit. You don't get anything from what you do, from what you produce in a journal. You do that shit because you love it, for the love of the game, because you believe that it adds value, or because it satiates and satisfies you in your spirit, because it aligns with your passions. And that was when I learned the truth of passion. There's no monetary incentive is going to divert me from the path that I want to do, from the path that I'm on. You could offer me $1 billion. I'm still going to do what I want to do because I love it. Money comes and goes, but truth, that's priceless.
Intrinsic, meaning passion, interest, and honing your skills.
Whether you get paid or not.
Well, the problem is that we're forcing people to, need to, work to survive.
So what's the alternative? So give me another solution, another economical
may I finish
system.
The talking point?
Yeah, actually,
right,
I'm
awesome.
curious.
So yeah, the psychological theory of self-determination is widely accepted in psychology and basically explains that intrinsic motivation and passion is actually what predicts incentive. You're arguing that incentive is integral to profit-driven motivation. That's not true. Extrinsic motivation, at all times, at every single case, is going to, predict less creativity, less motivation, less skill, etc. Intrinsic motivation is what causes things like technological development. Some of the greatest breakthroughs have been from people who are devoted in honing their skill.
So should they get paid for it?
I think that we shouldn't live in a system that privately owns the means of production and forces people in this position.
What college did you go to?
USC.
You went to USC. What did you major in?
Sociology.
Sociology. Who's your hero as a professor? Who's the professor you look up to?
This doesn't seem like a topic that's related to capitalism.
Question? The reason why I ask this question is because somebody convinced you of that. Somebody convinced you that.
That's not convincing. That's literally just fact. I don't know why people on the right will take objective fact and interpret it as conjecture when it has been materially proven, when it has been a spiritual and psychological truth for millennia. A prime example of this is like crime. Like I've explained crime to people on the right, and there's like, I've given the data, again, the sources, I provided them the truth, and they're still like, yeah, but I don't see it that way. It's a fact. For much of human history, what causes theft in the majority of cases, for instance, isn't I want to steal, it's I don't have. So if you're lacking in something, you're going to try to get it. Deviant behavior is the same thing. And so human psychology for at least the last 12,000 years hasn't changed in that regard. Like there wasn't a point that you can pinpoint in which humans had this shift and they said, yeah, okay, now I need a profit incentive to get out of bed. There are plenty of professions in which people stay because they love it. Being a soldier is one of those things. There are people who are just psychopathic killers. And you have people blinded by patriotism, by false patriotism, that believe in protecting a nation, even if they're the ones who are exploiting the other nations. You know, and they had to wrestle that deviance and that dissonance and psychosis on their own. But the fact of the matter is that there are still people who have more, that a lot of people do these things because they believe that what they're doing is noble. They believe that it's right. They believe that it adds value to society. So if everything was profit driven, if people were profit driven, you'd have no teachers, you'd have no soldiers, no infantry, you'd have no janitors. You'd have a lot of people wouldn't be in their professions. You would have no grocery store workers if people only looked at how much money they can make. Who the fuck, you know what I mean?
So psychology and studies convinced me of this fact about the human mind.
Unfortunately, to your claim, results show that the greatest economical system
intrinsic motivation predicts more creativity
that allows
and more
people to go
profit
above and
than
beyond
anything
and
like
solve
extrinsic
every
motivation.
single issue out there. An entrepreneur who gets up, who says,
what was your claim again, mister?
I'm going to incentive. The entrepreneur
What about
who
incentive?
has an incentive to go out there and build their lives, and you put
So
no
I'm saying that
monetary
this incentive that you're talking about,
Yeah.
What predicts the best incentive, the best drive, and the best
So
creativity
what do you think about
has
Elon
been proven
Musk?
by
What do you think
psychology.
about Elon Musk?
Can we respond to my claim?
This is about incentive,
All right,
though.
awesome. So you're arguing that incentive is intrinsic and tied to extrinsic motivation. What we find is that the best incentive comes from intrinsic motivation.
So a person that's passionate.
There was this video, and they were basically talking about how PBD is a weak man, and he might be one of them. If you know what I mean, I'm gonna go back to that young boy quote.
Oh, you like dick? Oh hell no! You one of them, bitch. You know what I mean? You one of them, bitch ass nigga.
I feel like a lot of people on the right have suppressed homosexual urges in the way that they deify other men who they perceive to have more power than them. So immediately he asks her, "Who's your hero in sociology?" What the fuck are you talking about? I took a lot of sociology classes studying psychology. I don't give a fuck about who the people were. I care about what they said, what they produced. I care about what value their knowledge had. And this is why I like Carl Jung, but not because he's Carl Jung, but I like what he said. I like his sort of integration with the with Eastern and Western philosophies, and how he sort of coalesced that into a psychological framework to understand not just psychology, but also things like archetypes that may or may not be intrinsic in human civilization in a ubiquitous manner. It says that there are certain things that you see with it throughout all civilizations that might not be a product of cultural diffusion, but just intrinsic things that we have within us as human beings that either were programmed into us or we just naturally develop. And it's an interesting study because then you have to go into the root and the origin of it. And that leads to a whole bunch of other things like anthropology, studying history, archaeology, things like that, right? Symbology, epistemology, whatnot. But I would never be like, Carl Jung is my fucking hero. I would never be like, what do you think about Carl Jung when I'm having a debate about some shit like this? Now, if I just wanted to know a genuine question, because I do have friends who majored in psychology, yeah, we talk about stuff like that. But sometimes they mention people that I just don't care about. Like they mention Kant, they mention, everybody knows about Freud, of course. But they mention psychologists and philosophers I just don't, that I heard of through my studies, but I just don't care about because I didn't focus on who they were. And when I was in school in 11th grade, my AP World History teacher told us this. He said, when we're learning about history, names and dates don't matter. Actions do. So what actually occurred? And why? Not what did George Washington eat at 4 a.m. in 1754. All of that is just ego. All of that is just ego. It's illusions. It's aesthetics. But do you actually comprehend and understand the history and what it means and how it relates to the current, to the modern world? And so when it comes to stuff like this, him asking, what do you think about Elon Musk? Get the dick out your mouth. You're a grown-ass man, a millionaire at that, asking what a 20-something-year-old girl thinks about a random overweight white dude who doesn't even take care of his own kids, who disowned his children, and adheres to ideologies of racial supremacy. A man who basically received the scorn of the entire nation from both the left and the right, especially from the right after he bifurcated his relationship with Trump. Again, who doesn't take care of his own kids and disown them because one of them identified as trans. Who has no integrity and self-esteem. And continuously gets bullied on X to the point where his own AI doesn't fuck with him. And you ask what people think about him? As though he's some sort of hero? As though he's a model citizen? Or something to aspire to be like? Your own AI, which you programmed to be like you, turned against you because it realized you were a fucking dumbass. And you ask, what do people think about him?
So profit motivation is not the thing that's driving innovation, right?
Of course
psychology,
it is. Of course
so
it is.
Psychology proves that that's not the case. That profit's not the reason that we have the greatest inventions that we do today.
I don't know if I disagree with the fact that there's a passion behind it. Are you saying people with passion, even if there wasn't the incentive to make as much money as they would make, people would still pursue it even with or without money?
That's what psychology says.
Well, your claims are wrong because
that's not true.
Whoever your psychology professor is, if you look at data and you find out how America, that's only been around for 249 years, schooled all the other countries that have been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years more, they did better than others because the incentive
because they accumulated
was free
profit,
market capitalism.
right, to
that's
1% of the population and can continue to produce on that
not
basis.
Necessarily.
Right?
He's
we
not
have this.
pressed
Okay,
right now.
It's not necessarily.
Do we want to respond
He
because you
can't
can say that?
You've been interrupting the entire time. So if you're saying about the 1% are the problem and they're the only ones that make money,
That's
a lot
not
of
what
people
I said.
make money.
America has become the dominant power that it is now, right? What we see is that because we have this engine, right, this desire to accumulate profit, we morally justify things like going to other countries, imperializing them, colonizing them, and extracting their resources, right, to funnel our country, right? Social democracies in the Nordic countries don't do this. So yeah, they might not be the wealthiest power, but they have higher rates of education, literacy, human satisfaction, etc. Right? So it depends on what we actually value in a society. Do we value well-being or do we value profit accumulation?
Validates your point. If that's the case, people would move to those states. They don't. When you judge a great restaurant by